I thought grief was the cruelest thing a woman could feel, until I saw my husband's wedding ring gleaming on another woman's hand, across the hedge. That day, I realized the grave didn't take him. She did. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, stay with me. This is not just my story. It's a reminder that the truth always finds a way home. 3 years after Harold's funeral, I'd almost learned to live with the silence. Almost. The house on Magnolia Cove had once been filled with laughter, with the sound of Harold's deep voice reading medical journals aloud while I corrected student papers in the evening light. Now it held only echoes and the persistent crash of waves against the rocky shore below. The Atlantic stretched endlessly beyond my windows, gray-green and indifferent, as if reminding me daily that the world continued its relentless turning whether I was ready or not. I'd built a routine in those 3 years. Survival, my colleagues from the university would have called it. Defense mechanism, I would have diagnosed in a patient. Wake at 6, coffee on the veranda overlooking the sea. Tend to my roses. Harold's roses, really. The ones he'd planted our first spring in Savannah. Water them, prune them, talk to them like the foolish old widow I'd become. That April morning started like any other. The air was soft with salt and the promise of heat, the kind of coastal Georgia dawn that tourists pay fortunes to experience. The sky blushed pink and gold, and somewhere in the live oaks, a mockingbird ran through its repertoire of stolen songs. I was wearing my gardening gloves, the good leather ones Harold had given me for our 45th anniversary, just months before the heart attack that took him. The roses needed deadheading. The Cherokee roses along the fence line had bloomed early and prolifically, their white petals already beginning to brown at the edges. That's when I saw her. Cynthia Reeves had moved in next door 6 months ago, into the old Morrison place that had sat empty for 2 years after Gladys Morrison passed. She was younger than me, mid-50s I'd guessed, though she had that carefully maintained look that made exact age difficult to determine. Blonde hair that was perhaps a shade too golden, clothes that were perhaps a touch too fashionable for quiet Magnolia Cove, where most of us favored comfort over style. She'd been friendly in that surface way newcomers often are. Waves across the hedge, comments about the weather, an offer to collect my mail when I mentioned a trip to visit my daughter in Charleston. I'd been polite but distant. At 78, I'd earned the right to choose my friendships carefully, and something about Cynthia had always felt slightly off, like a painting hung at just the wrong angle. That morning, she was on her knees in her garden bed planting something. Begonias, perhaps, or impatiens. Those shade-loving flowers that do so well under Savannah's live oaks. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and pale pink gardening gloves, and she was humming something tuneless as she worked. Then she reached up to adjust her hat, and the morning sun caught something on her left hand. Gold. The unmistakable flash of gold. I blinked, my pruning shears frozen mid-cut. From this distance, perhaps 20 feet across the hedge, I couldn't see details. Just that gleam, that particular weight and color of gold that spoke of quality, of heirloom, of permanence. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Cynthia called out, noticing me. She stood, brushing dirt from her knees, and waved, and there it was again. That flash on her hand, not just any ring, a wide band, substantial and masculine. Exactly like, no, I was being foolish. I was 78 years old, and grief could play tricks on even the sharpest mind. There were thousands of gold wedding bands in the world. Millions. The odds of this being, but I knew. Even from that distance, even without seeing the details, something in my bones recognized it. Dr. Lowell? Cynthia's voice cut through my thoughts. Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced my face into the pleasant, neutral expression I'd perfected over 40 years of clinical practice. Just fine, dear. The sun was in my eyes for a moment. I turned back to my roses, but my hands were shaking. The pruning shears slipped from my grip and clattered onto the flagstone path. I left them there and walked back into the house, my heart hammering against my ribs with a force that reminded me I was not, in fact, immune to the passage of time. Inside, I went straight to Harold's study. I'd left it largely untouched since his death. A shrine, my daughter Ellen had called it, with the faint disapproval of the younger generation who believed in moving on, in clean breaks and fresh starts. But I'd spent 48 years married to that man. His absence was a presence in itself, and this room, with its leather chair and mahogany desk and shelves lined with medical texts, was the heart of that presence. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk, where I'd stored his personal effects after the funeral. His watch, a Rolex he'd inherited from his father. His cufflinks, silver and onyx, formal and dignified like the man himself. His wallet, still containing his driver's license and a photo of Ellen's children. And there, in a small velvet box, should have been his wedding ring. The box was there. I opened it with trembling fingers. Empty. I stared at the navy velvet interior, at the shallow impression where a ring should rest. For a long moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing, or rather what I wasn't seeing. Harold had been buried with his ring. I remembered distinctly. The funeral director, what was his name? Pemberton, yes. Samuel Pemberton from Magnolia Memorial, had asked me specifically, "Will Mr. Lowell be wearing his wedding band, Dr. Lowell?" And I'd said yes, of course yes. We'd worn those rings for 48 years. I still wore mine even now, the matching band, slightly narrower than Harold's, with the same inscription inside, to Sarah, my forever anchor. Harold had chosen the words himself. We'd been married on a boat, you see, a small yacht belonging to his mentor. The symbolism had meant everything to him. The sea, the anchor, the idea of being each other's constant in life's storms. I pressed my palm to my chest, trying to slow my racing heart. This was absurd. I was letting my imagination run wild, seeing patterns where none existed. The ring in the box was probably in my safety deposit box at the bank, or perhaps Ellen had taken it for safekeeping, or I was losing my mind, which at 78 was a legitimate concern. But I didn't think so. My mind was still sharp. I still did the crossword every morning, still read medical journals to keep up with advances in psychology, still occasionally consulted with former colleagues on difficult cases. I might be old, but I wasn't senile, which meant the ring truly was missing. And Cynthia Reeves was wearing a ring that looked exactly like Harold's. I sat down in Harold's chair, the leather creaking beneath my weight, and let myself think thoughts I'd been avoiding for 3 years. What if I hadn't known my husband as well as I thought? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while the house creaked around me and the sea murmured its eternal conversation with the shore. The rational part of my mind, the psychologist, the scientist, insisted I was jumping to conclusions. Grief could manifest in strange ways, fixations, paranoia, the need to find meaning in random coincidences. But the woman in me, the wife, knew better. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I would investigate, quietly, methodically, the way I'd been trained to approach any puzzle. Observe, gather data, form hypotheses, test them. The first step was to confirm what I remembered about the burial. At 8 o'clock, as soon as I judged it reasonable, I called Magnolia Memorial. Magnolia Memorial Funeral Home, this is Denise speaking. How may I provide comfort today? The scripted greeting nearly made me hang up, but I steadied myself. This is Dr. Serafina Lowell. I'm calling about my husband, Harold Lowell. He was buried through your facility 3 years ago. Oh, Dr. Lowell. The woman's voice shifted, became more personal. I remember. I'm so sorry for your loss. How can I help you today? I chose my words carefully. I'm updating some paperwork for the estate, and I need to confirm what personal effects were buried with my husband. Specifically, I need to know if his wedding ring was included. There was a pause. Let me pull up that file. 1 moment, please. I was put on hold. Soft classical music played. Pachelbel's Canon, that funeral standard, while I waited. My fingers drummed against the kitchen counter. Through the window, I could see Cynthia's house. No movement yet. It was still early, Dr. Lowell. Denise was back, and her voice had changed. Uncertain now, cautious. I have the file here. According to our records, Mr. Lowell was buried in his navy suit with a white shirt. But there's a note here about the jewelry. What kind of note? Another pause. Longer this time. Ma'am, I think you should speak with Mr. Pemberton directly. He handled your husband's arrangements personally. He'll be in at 9. Can I have him call you? What does the note say, Denise? Ma'am, I really think... Denise. I used my professional voice, the one that had convinced countless resistant patients to open up over the years. Firm but kind, authoritative but not threatening. I'm 78 years old and I've been a clinical psychologist for 40 years. Whatever is in that file, I can handle it. Please tell me what the note says. I heard her take a breath. It says the jewelry was removed before burial. By next of kin authorization, the floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. What authorization? I never authorized any such thing. There's a signature here, and a witness signature. It's all properly documented. But Dr. Lowell, I really don't feel comfortable. Have Mr. Pemberton call me. Immediately when he arrives, I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking again. Not just shaking, trembling violently as if I had palsy. I clasped them together, pressed them against my chest, tried to breathe slowly. Someone had forged my signature. Someone had removed Harold's ring before burial. The phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Hello? Dr. Lowell, this is Samuel Pemberton. Denise said you had questions about your husband's burial arrangements. His voice was smooth, professional, with just enough sympathy to be appropriate but not maudlin. I remembered him now, mid-40s, prematurely gray, one of those men who seemed born to work in funeral homes. Calm, unflappable. Mr. Pemberton, thank you for calling so promptly. I need to understand what happened to my husband's wedding ring. He didn't hesitate. The ring was removed before burial, ma'am. We have the proper authorization on file. Next of kin requested the jewelry be returned to the family before. I am the next of kin, Mr. Pemberton, and I made no such request. Silence. When he spoke again, the smooth professional tone had cracked slightly. Dr. Lowell, I assure you, we have your signature on the authorization form. It's all properly documented. We would never release personal effects without proper then someone forged my signature. And I need to see that form. Today, ma'am, that's a serious allegation. Our reputation, Mr. Pemberton. I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Inside, I was screaming. I'm not accusing you or your facility of wrongdoing. I'm telling you that I believe someone may have committed fraud in connection with my husband's burial. I need to see that authorization form. If it helps, I can come to your office with my driver's license and provide a handwriting sample. Another pause. I see. Yes, that would be... Yes. Can you come this morning? I'll be there in half an hour. I dressed carefully. A simple navy dress, pearls, my good shoes. When you're 78 and making serious accusations, you need to look competent, not crazy. I applied lipstick with a steady hand, pinned my hair into its usual twist, and studied my reflection. Serafina Lowell looked back at me. 78 years old, but still sharp, still present. Dark skin that had aged well, though gravity had done its inevitable work. The same high cheekbones Ellen had inherited. The same intense gaze that had made me effective in therapy sessions. I looked like a woman who knew her own mind. Good. The drive to Magnolia Memorial took 20 minutes. The funeral home was housed in a converted antebellum mansion, all white columns and black shutters, Spanish moss dripping from the ancient oaks that shaded the circular drive, beautiful and morbid, like everything in Savannah's death industry. Samuel Pemberton met me in his office, a room decorated in shades of gray and cream, with leather chairs and abstract art that was probably meant to be soothing. He looked nervous. Good. Dr. Lowell, please sit down. He gestured to one of the leather chairs. I have the file here. I must say this is highly unusual. In 30 years in this business, I've never... The form, please. He opened a manila folder and slid a paper across the desk. This is the authorization for removal and return of personal effects. As you can see, it's signed. I picked up the paper. My hands were steady now, clinical detachment settling over me like a familiar coat. This was just another puzzle, just another case to analyze. The form was standard enough. Authorization to remove jewelry and personal effects prior to burial, with a list of items. 1 gold wedding band, 1 wristwatch, which I knew I'd kept, 1 pair of cufflinks, also in my possession. At the bottom, 2 signatures. The first was meant to be mine, Serafina R. Lowell, in a flowing script that looked similar to my handwriting, but wasn't quite right. The S was wrong. I always looped mine twice, a habit from childhood. And the R in my middle name was too angular. The second signature made my blood run cold. Cynthia Reeves, witness. Who brought you this form? I asked quietly. Pemberton shifted in his chair. Mrs. Reeves. She said you were too distraught to come in person, that you'd signed it at home and asked her to deliver it. Dr. Lowell, she seemed very sincere. She said she was a close family friend, that she'd been helping you with arrangements because your daughter was still traveling from... I'd never met Cynthia Reeves before she moved in next door 6 months ago. The color drained from his face. Oh, God. Mr. Pemberton, I need a copy of this form, and I need you to document everything you remember about that interaction. Every detail, of course. Of course, Dr. Lowell, I am so sorry. We did verify the signature against your ID, but honestly, in these circumstances, with grief, we try to be understanding rather than suspicious. I'm not blaming you. Though part of me did, part of me wanted to rage at his incompetence. But that would accomplish nothing. I need that documentation, and I need to know who picked up the ring. Mrs. Reeves. She said she'd deliver it to you. Dr. Lowell, I swear if I'd had any idea, it's done now. What matters is what we do next. I took the copy he made and left, walking carefully to my car with my head high. Only when I was safely inside, doors locked, did I let myself feel the full weight of what I'd learned. Cynthia Reeves hadn't just stolen my husband's ring. She'd planned it. Forged my signature, walked into that funeral home and lied with such conviction that professionals believed her, which meant this wasn't opportunistic theft. This was calculated, intentional, and if she'd gone to such lengths to get that ring, there had to be a reason. I spent that afternoon in Harold's study, going through every file, every document, every scrap of paper he'd left behind. I'd done this before, of course, in the weeks after his death, sorting through the practical matters of death, insurance policies, bank accounts, the will. But I'd done it then in a fog of grief, mechanically checking boxes, signing forms, moving through the bureaucracy of loss without really seeing. Now I looked with different eyes. Suspicious eyes. The eyes of someone who'd just learned her dead husband's ring had been stolen by a woman who would move in next door 3 years later. The more I thought about it, the more impossible the coincidence seemed. Magnolia Cove wasn't a large community, but it wasn't tiny either. Perhaps 300 homes, scattered along this stretch of coast. The Morrison place could have been bought by anyone, but Cynthia Reeves had bought it. The woman who'd stolen Harold's ring had chosen to live next door to me. Why? I started with the financial documents, bank statements, investment accounts, credit card records. Harold had always handled most of our finances, not because I was incapable, but because he enjoyed it, found comfort in the orderliness of numbers and accounts. After his death, I'd been surprised by how substantial our savings were. Harold's medical practice had been successful, and he'd invested wisely. Combined with my professor's pension, we'd been more than comfortable. But now I looked more carefully at the patterns. And I found them. Withdrawals. Cash withdrawals, starting about 5 years before Harold's death. Never enormous amounts, $500 here, $1,000 there, but frequent enough. Regular enough. Every month, sometimes twice a month. I pulled out my reading glasses and studied the dates. The pattern was clear once I knew to look for it. The withdrawals happened like clockwork. The first and third Thursday of every month I felt sick. This was the behavior of a man with a secret. The behavior of a man paying for something he didn't want traced, or paying someone. I kept digging. Harold's will was straightforward. Everything to me, with trusts established for Ellen and the grandchildren. Nothing unusual. But then I found something I'd overlooked before. A copy of the will dated 6 months before his death. A new version. I compared them carefully. The changes were subtle. A few additional charitable bequests. A slightly different structure for the grandchildren's trusts. But there was one change that made my hands go cold. In the earlier version, there was a codicil, a small bequest, $50,000 to someone listed only as CR, for services rendered. In the final version, that codicil was gone. CR Cynthia Reeves. I sat back in Harold's chair, my mind racing. He'd planned to leave her money, then changed his mind. Why? Had their relationship ended? Had he felt guilty? Or had he planned to leave me entirely and take everything with him? I needed more information. I picked up my phone and called Ellen. Mom, I was just thinking about you. How are you? My daughter's voice, warm and concerned, nearly broke me, but I held steady. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I have a question about your father's storage unit, the one where he kept his boat equipment." "Oh, that. Mom, I meant to ask you about that. We've been paying the rental fees on that unit for 3 years now. Do you want me to come down and help you clean it out? I know you said you weren't ready before, but not yet." My voice came out sharper than I intended. I softened it. "I mean, not this visit, but I was thinking about going through some of his things, and I couldn't remember where exactly it was located. Ellen gave me the address." "Are you sure you don't want me to come?" "I could fly down this weekend. Mark can handle the kids for a few days." "I'm sure, honey. This is something I need to do alone." After we hung up, I sat for a long moment, studying the address Ellen had given me. Coastal Storage Solutions, on the outskirts of Savannah, past the historic district. I'd never been there. Harold had always handled anything related to his boat and equipment. His boat. Another thing I hadn't thought about carefully. Harold had loved sailing, spent weekends out on the water. I'd sometimes gone with him in the early years of our marriage, but I was prone to seasickness, so eventually he'd gone alone. Or so I'd thought. Now I wondered, had he really been alone? The next morning, I drove to Coastal Storage Solutions. It was one of those modern facilities, all concrete and steel, with rows of orange doors and keypad locks. I found Harold's unit, B47, and used the code Ellen had given me. The door rolled up with a metallic screech. Inside was chaos. Not the careful organization I'd expected from Harold, but disorder. Boxes stacked haphazardly, sailing equipment jumbled together, life jackets and ropes and navigational charts all mixed together as if someone had gone through everything hastily. I stepped inside, letting my eyes adjust to the dimness. A single bulb overhead cast harsh shadows. The space smelled of salt and mildew and something else. Perfume. Faint but unmistakable. Not my perfume. I'd worn Chanel No. 5 for 40 years. This was something else. Something floral and sweet. I started going through boxes. The first few contained exactly what I expected. Nautical equipment, fishing gear, waterproof bags. But in the fourth box, I found something that made me stop breathing. Photographs. Dozens of them, loose in the box as if hastily hidden. Harold and a blonde woman. Younger than me, smiling, wearing a sundress and oversized sunglasses. They were on a boat, Harold's boat. I recognized the teak deck and brass fittings. The woman's hand was on Harold's shoulder, casual and familiar. I flipped through them with numb fingers. More photos of the same woman, Harold and the blonde woman at a restaurant. At a beach, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. In every photo, they looked happy, intimate, like a couple. I turned one photo over. On the back, in Harold's handwriting, Cynthia, Tybee Island, summer 2019, 3 years before his death. 5 years ago. I sank down onto a box, the photographs scattered around me. The overhead bulb flickered, and in its uncertain light, I studied the face of the woman in the photos. It was her. Older now, her face subtly changed by time and perhaps surgery, but unmistakably Cynthia Reeves. My husband hadn't just known her. He'd had a whole separate life with her. For years. I don't know how long I sat there, surrounded by evidence of Harold's betrayal. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Long enough for the security guard to knock on the door and ask if I was all right. Fine, I managed. Just reminiscing. I gathered the photographs, put them carefully in my purse, and left. In my car, I locked the doors and let myself cry for the first time since Harold's funeral. Not tears of grief now, but of rage. Pure, incandescent rage at the man I'd loved for 48 years. The man who'd betrayed me so completely. And at the woman wearing his ring, living next door. A constant reminder of everything I'd lost. The photographs changed everything. They proved that Cynthia Reeves and Harold had known each other, had been involved, had shared significant time together. But they didn't explain why she'd stolen his ring or why she'd moved next door to me. I needed to understand the full scope of what Harold had been hiding. And I needed help. That's when I thought of Marcus Webb. Marcus had been one of Harold's medical students years ago, before he'd switched careers and become a private investigator. He'd stayed in touch with us over the years, sent Christmas cards, occasionally stopped by for dinner when he was in Savannah. He was in his 50s now, successful, discreet, and he owed Harold a favor. Harold had written him a recommendation letter when he'd applied to the investigator licensing board, vouching for his character and integrity. I called him from my car. "Still parked outside Coastal Storage, Dr. Lowell." What a wonderful surprise. "How are you?" "I need your help, Marcus, professionally." His tone shifted immediately. "Of course. What's going on?" I gave him the abbreviated version. The ring, Cynthia, the photographs, the forged signature. As I spoke, I could hear him taking notes, his pen scratching against paper. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Dr. Lowell, I'm so sorry. This is complicated, but I can help. I'll need copies of everything you have, the photos, the authorization form, any financial records that show irregularities. I'll scan them tonight and email them to you." "Good. And Dr. Lowell? I know this is painful, but I need to ask, are you prepared for what I might find? Because if Harold was involved with this woman for years, there may be more. Financial entanglements, legal issues, things that could get messy." I watched Cynthia's house through my car window. The lights were on inside. She was home, probably making dinner, probably wearing Harold's ring while she chopped vegetables or set the table. "I'm prepared," I said. "I need to know the truth. All of it. Then I'll start immediately." Marcus worked quickly. Within 3 days, he called me with preliminary findings. "Dr. Lowell, can we meet? This isn't something I want to discuss over the phone." We met at a coffee shop near Forsyth Park, far enough from Magnolia Cove that we wouldn't run into anyone I knew. Marcus arrived with a thick folder and the grim expression of someone bearing bad news. "Tell me," I said, once we were settled at a corner table. He opened the folder. "I've been thorough. Financial records, property searches, social media analysis. And Dr. Lowell, it's worse than you thought." He slid a document across the table. "This is a deed. Harold purchased a condo in Hilton Head 3 years before his death. He put it in an LLC to hide the purchase. The LLC's registered agent is Cynthia Reeves." I stared at the document. A condo. He'd bought her a condo. There's more. Marcus pulled out bank statements. Harold set up a separate account. Monthly deposits into an account in Cynthia's name. $5,000 every month for 4 years. That's $240,000, Dr. Lowell. The numbers swam before my eyes. $250,000. Money that should have been ours, that I'd thought was in our savings, slowly drained away to support his mistress. How? I managed. How did I not see this? He was careful. The withdrawals were small enough not to trigger alerts. He probably told you they were for boat maintenance or medical equipment or charity, and you trusted him. Trust. Such a fragile thing. So easily shattered. What else? I asked, because I could see there was more. Marcus hesitated. There's life insurance. A policy Harold took out 7 years ago, separate from the one you knew about. The beneficiary is Cynthia Reeves, $500,000. I felt like I was falling, tumbling through space with nothing to grab onto. Did she collect? No. She tried to, but there was a problem with the policy. Harold had listed her as his wife on the application. Insurance fraud. The company denied the claim and reported it to the authorities. That's probably why she never pushed it. She couldn't risk an investigation. So she'd settled for stealing his ring instead. A consolation prize. There's one more thing, Marcus said quietly. I found records of a joint bank account. Harold's name and Cynthia's. It was opened 5 years ago. At its peak, there was close to $300,000 in it. But 6 months before Harold's death, he emptied it. Transferred everything back to your joint account. He ended it, I said slowly. 6 months before he died, he tried to end it. It looks that way. And Dr. Lowell? I talked to the clerk at the storage facility. She remembered both Harold and Cynthia. She said they used to come in together, that she assumed Cynthia was his wife. But she said the last time she saw them, about 6 months before Harold died, they were arguing. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but it was heated. Cynthia was crying. The timeline was becoming clear. Harold had tried to end his affair. He'd removed Cynthia from his will, taken back the money, tried to reclaim his life, but then his heart had given out before he could finish untangling himself, and Cynthia had been left with nothing but stolen photographs and a fake insurance claim she couldn't pursue, until she'd forged my signature and stolen his ring. Why move next door? I asked. Why not just disappear with the ring and move on? Marcus shook his head. That's the question, isn't it? My guess, she's not done. She wants something from you. Maybe revenge for Harold ending things. Maybe she thinks there's more money somewhere. Maybe she's just twisted and wants to hurt you. I thought about Cynthia, waving across the hedge, smiling that surface smile, wearing Harold's ring like a trophy. And I thought about the woman in those photographs. Younger and happy and convinced she'd found love. What must it have been like? To be promised a future with Harold and then have him disappear back into his marriage? To watch him die before you could confront him? Before you could get answers? I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I thought about the forged signature, the calculated theft, the deliberate choice to move next door and torment me with the sight of my husband's ring on her finger. No. Sympathy was wasted on Cynthia Reeves. What now? Marcus asked. You have enough evidence for a police report. Forgery, fraud, theft. She could face serious charges. I looked at the folder on the table, at the evidence of my husband's double life and Cynthia's crimes. I thought about what I wanted. Justice? Revenge? Peace? Not yet, I said slowly. First, I want to talk to her. I want to understand. I want to hear her say it. Marcus looked dubious. Dr. Lowell, that's not advisable. She's unstable, and confronting her could be dangerous. I'm 78 years old, Marcus. I've spent 40 years getting people to tell me their deepest secrets. I can handle Cynthia Reeves. He still looked worried, but he nodded. At least let me be nearby. When you confront her, I'll park down the street. Keep your phone on you. If anything goes wrong, call me or dial 911. I agreed, though I didn't think it would be necessary. Cynthia wasn't dangerous, not physically. Her weapons were subtler. Lies and manipulation, and the slow poison of living next door as a constant reminder of betrayal. But two could play at that game. And I'd been a psychologist for 40 years. I knew all about the subtle weapons of the mind. I chose my moment carefully. Saturday evening, when the sun was setting over the water and most of the neighbors had gone inside for dinner. I'd watched Cynthia all week, learning her routines. She gardened in the mornings, went out most afternoons, and spent evenings on her back patio with a glass of wine. Predictable. Comfortable in her new life. Unsuspecting. I dressed carefully. A simple cotton dress, my hair loose around my shoulders, no jewelry except my own wedding band. I wanted to look non-threatening, like a lonely old widow making a social call. Marcus was parked 3 houses down, his nondescript sedan barely visible in the gathering dusk. My phone was in my pocket, fully charged on speed dial. I walked across the lawn and through the gap in the hedge that separated our properties. Cynthia's garden was beautiful, I noticed for the first time. She had a talent for it. Roses and hydrangeas and azaleas, all carefully tended. The patio was decorated with hanging baskets and wrought iron furniture, and soft music played from speakers mounted near the back door. Cynthia was sitting in one of the chairs, a glass of white wine in her hand, watching the sunset. She was wearing a flowing caftan and sandals, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, and on her left hand, Harold's ring. She saw me and smiled, that surface smile I'd come to recognize. Dr. Lowell! What a pleasant surprise. Would you like some wine? I just opened a lovely Pinot Grigio. No, thank you. I sat down in the chair across from her without being invited. I'd like to talk to you about your ring. Her smile faltered slightly. My ring? I let the silence stretch, watching her face. This was a technique I'd used countless times in therapy. Wait. Let the discomfort build. Let them fill the void with their own anxiety. Most people couldn't tolerate silence. They'd rush to fill it, and in that rush, they'd reveal themselves. Cynthia took a sip of her wine. I'm not sure what you mean. That ring on your left hand. The gold band. It's quite distinctive. She glanced down at it, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Fear? Triumph? It passed too quickly for me to be certain. It was a gift, she said carefully. From whom? A family member. It's quite old, actually. An heirloom, I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. That's interesting, because I have reason to believe that ring belonged to my husband, Harold Lowell. The color drained from her face. Her hand, the one wearing the ring, trembled slightly. She set down her wine glass with exaggerated care. That's ridiculous. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? I leaned forward. Let me tell you what I know, Cynthia. I know you forged my signature at Magnolia Memorial to claim Harold's ring before he was buried. I know you and Harold had an affair that lasted at least 5 years. I know he bought you a condo in Hilton Head, gave you hundreds of thousands of dollars, made you the beneficiary on a fraudulent life insurance policy. Each sentence landed like a blow. She flinched with every one. I know he tried to end it 6 months before he died, I continued, my voice steady and cold. That he took back the money, removed you from his will, tried to return to his real life. His life with me. Stop. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know you came to his storage unit, that you had photographs together, that you thought he was going to leave me for you. I know that when he died, you were left with nothing. No money, no insurance payout, no future. Just stolen memories and a ring that doesn't belong to you. Tears were streaming down her face now, black mascara trailing down her cheeks. But I felt no sympathy, only the cold satisfaction of watching someone's lies collapse around them. What I don't know, I said softly, is why you moved here. Why torture me with your presence? Why wear that ring where I can see it every day? What could you possibly hope to gain? She was silent for a long moment, staring down at the ring on her finger. When she finally spoke, her voice was bitter and broken. He promised me. For 5 years, he promised me he'd leave you, that we'd have a real life together. He said you were cold, that your marriage was dead, that he only stayed out of obligation. Each word was a knife, even though I knew they were lies, or perhaps half lies, the stories Harold had told to justify his betrayal. He said we'd sail together, she continued, her voice cracking. That we'd retire to the condo, spend our days on the water. He showed me house plans. We talked about Italy, about growing old together, and I believed him. God help me, I believed every word, but he ended it. He said it was a mistake, that he'd been confused, going through a midlife crisis, that he loved you and always had. He took back everything, the money, the condo, even changed his will. Like I was nothing, like those 5 years meant nothing. She looked up at me, and in her eyes, I saw genuine pain. Alongside the manipulation and selfishness, there was real hurt. When he died, I had nothing. Do you understand? Nothing. I'd given up my own life, my own career, because he promised me a future. And then he was just gone. No goodbye. No explanation. Nothing but a funeral I couldn't even attend, because you wouldn't have understood why the family friend was sobbing in the back row. So you stole his ring. She laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. I took what was mine. What should have been mine. That ring was supposed to come off his finger and go on to mine. We'd talked about it, replacing your ring with mine, making it official. The audacity of it stole my breath. She'd planned to have Harold replace my ring with hers, to erase me completely. And moving here? I managed. I wanted you to see. I wanted you to know. Even if you never understood what you were seeing. Every time you saw this ring, every time you saw me living here, I wanted you to feel what I felt. The presence of someone who had what should have been yours. The presence of betrayal. Yes. She twisted the ring on her finger. And suddenly she yanked it off and threw it across the patio. It hit the flagstones with a sharp clink and rolled into the garden. But it's not enough. It's never enough. He's still dead. And you still have everything. The house, the money, the memories, the legitimacy. You were his wife. I was just the mistake he tried to fix. I stared at her. This woman who'd been my husband's mistress, who'd stolen from me, who'd moved next door to haunt me, and I felt empty. Not angry anymore. Not even hurt. Just tired. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. Harold did love me. Not perfectly, obviously. Not faithfully. But I was his wife for 48 years, and that meant something. It meant something when he ended things with you. It meant something that he came back to me, that he tried to repair what he'd broken. Are you trying to make me feel worse? She laughed bitterly. It's working. No, I'm telling you the truth. The truth you need to understand before I destroy you. Her head snapped up. What? I stood, smoothing my dress. I have everything, Cynthia. Documents, photographs, financial records, proof of the forged signature, the insurance fraud, the theft. I have witness statements. I have enough evidence to put you in prison for years. She went white. You're bluffing, am I? I pulled out my phone, showed her a photo Marcus had sent, a clear scan of the forged authorization form, with both signatures visible. The penalty for forgery in Georgia is up to 15 years. Add in the insurance fraud, and you're looking at 20. Maybe more. No. She shook her head frantically. No, you can't. I didn't mean... It was grief. I wasn't thinking clearly. You moved next door to me, Cynthia. That shows premeditation. That shows you've been thinking very clearly for a very long time. She was crying again. Ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Please, I'll give back the ring. I'll move. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't send me to prison. I'm 54 years old. I'd die there. I looked at her, crumpled and desperate, and felt nothing but contempt. Not for the affair. Harold had been equally guilty of that. But for the theft, the forgery, the calculated cruelty of moving next door. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice hard. Tomorrow you're going to contact a real estate agent and list this house. You're going to sell it quickly, at whatever price you need to. You're going to leave Magnolia Cove and never come back. I will. I promise I will. I'm not finished. You're also going to sign a confession, admitting to the forgery and theft. My investigator will draft it. You'll sign it in front of a notary. And if you ever contact me again, if you ever tell anyone about Harold's affair, if you cause any trouble whatsoever, I'll take that confession straight to the police. She stared at me, trapped and terrified. That's blackmail. No, that's mercy. Which is more than you deserve. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Cynthia, pick up that ring. It belongs to me. I walked away without looking back, leaving her sobbing in her beautiful garden. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. This was justice. Not the kind that came from courts and prisons, but the kind that came from taking back control, from refusing to be a victim. Marcus was waiting by his car when I reached the street. How did it go? She'll sign whatever you need her to sign. Draft a confession. Make it comprehensive. I want everything documented. He studied my face in the gathering darkness. Are you all right? Was I? I thought about Harold, about 48 years of marriage that had been at least partially a lie. I thought about Cynthia, broken and desperate on her patio. I thought about the version of myself from a week ago, who'd been watering roses and living in comfortable ignorance. I will be, I said. Cynthia signed the confession 3 days later. Marcus brought it to my house, along with Harold's ring, which she'd cleaned and polished before returning it, as if that somehow made the theft less reprehensible. She's already contacted a realtor, Marcus told me, setting the documents on my kitchen table. The house will be on the market by Friday. She seems eager to leave. I picked up the ring, feeling its weight in my palm. The gold was warm from Marcus's pocket. I turned it over, looking for the inscription I knew was there. To Sarah, my forever anchor. Harold had worn this for 48 years. Had it felt like a chain toward the end of his affair? Had he looked at these words and felt guilt? Or had they meant so little that he could contemplate giving it to Cynthia instead? Dr. Lowell? Marcus's voice was gentle. What will you do with it? I don't know yet. I set it down on the table. I thought I wanted it back. But now that I have it, it just feels like evidence. Like a reminder of everything I didn't see. You couldn't have known. Harold was careful, deliberate. He hid it well. Did he, though? Or did I just not want to see? I sat down heavily. The late nights at the hospital, the weekend conferences, the separate phone he said was for patients. Looking back, the signs were all there. I just chose to trust him, Marcus sat across from me. Trust isn't the same as blindness, Dr. Lowell. You had every right to believe your husband was faithful. That's what marriage vows mean. I appreciated his kindness, but I knew better. I'd spent 40 years as a therapist. I'd counseled countless people through affairs, helped them see the warning signs they'd missed. I'd prided myself on my insight, my ability to read people, and yet I'd been blind to my own husband's betrayal for 5 years. There's something else, Marcus said, pulling another folder from his briefcase. I kept digging into Harold's finances. I wanted to make sure there weren't any other surprises. My stomach tightened. And I found another account, offshore in the Cayman Islands. It's more complicated than the others. Harold used a shell company to hide it. But once I knew what to look for, He opened the folder, showing me bank statements. There's $430,000 in it. I stared at the numbers, trying to process. Why? He already gave Cynthia hundreds of thousands. Why hide more? That's the interesting part. Look at the dates. He pointed to the account opening date. This was set up 6 months before Harold died, right when he was ending things with Cynthia. And look at this. He showed me a transfer authorization. He scheduled a transfer of the entire amount to your joint account, to happen on what would have been his 65th birthday. Harold had died 3 months before his 65th birthday. He was setting things right, I said slowly. He was putting back everything he'd taken. It looks that way. The offshore account, the money from the joint account with Cynthia, maybe other funds I haven't found yet. He was consolidating everything, planning to return it all. My guess is he was going to tell you, make a clean breast of it, start fresh, but his heart had given out first. And all his plans to confess, to repent, to make amends had died with him. I thought about Harold in those last 6 months. Had he been stressed, guilty, preparing himself for the conversation he knew would devastate me? I tried to remember if he'd seemed different. If there had been signs that he was carrying this enormous burden. There had been. Small things I'd attributed to aging or work stress. The way he'd held my hand more often. The unexpected gifts, flowers, jewelry, a weekend trip to Charleston. The times I'd caught him staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He'd been saying goodbye to his secret life. And trying to find his way back to me. The money, Marcus said. It's legally yours. Harold's estate passed to you. And this account was technically part of that estate. You'll need to work with an international attorney to repatriate the funds, but it can be done. Nearly $500,000. Money Harold had hidden. Money he'd probably taken from our savings over the years. Now it would come home, but it felt tainted. Blood money. Affair money. The price of Harold's double life. Use it for the legal fees, I said. Whatever's left, I'll put in a trust for Ellen and the grandchildren. I don't want it. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. I'll handle it, Dr. Lowell. I know this has been painful, but you should know. Everything I found suggests Harold truly did end the affair. He cut off all contact with Cynthia. He was putting the finances right. The last 6 months of his life, he was trying to become the man you thought he was. Too little, too late. Maybe. But it counts for something, doesn't it? That he tried? I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what I thought anymore. Harold had betrayed me, yes, but he'd also tried to make it right. He'd chosen me in the end. Did that redeem him? Did it matter? Over the next few weeks, I watched Cynthia pack up and leave. She'd sold the house quickly, taking a loss to speed the process. I never spoke to her again. The morning the moving truck came, I stayed inside, watching from Harold's study window as they loaded her belongings. She looked old, I thought, diminished. The confident woman who'd waved across the hedge was gone, replaced by someone who moved with the heavy slowness of defeat. When the truck finally drove away, Cynthia stood alone in the driveway for a moment. She turned to look at my house, and even from this distance I could see the sadness in her posture. Then she got in her car and drove away. I never learned where she went. I didn't want to know. With Cynthia gone, I thought I'd feel relief. Peace. The return of the quiet life I'd had before I'd seen that ring glinting in the sunlight. But instead, I felt restless. The house seemed too large, too full of Harold's ghost. Every room held memories. The study where he'd planned his double life. The bedroom where he'd slept beside me while thinking of her. The kitchen where he'd kissed me goodbye before driving to Cynthia's condo. I couldn't escape him here. Couldn't escape the knowledge of his betrayal. Ellen came to visit, concerned by something she'd heard in my voice during our weekly phone calls. "Mom, you seem different," she said over lunch on the veranda. "I can't put my finger on it, but you're not yourself." I'd debated telling her. Protecting her from the knowledge that her father had been unfaithful seemed like the maternal thing to do. But Ellen was 45 years old, a mother herself, a woman who deserved the truth. So I told her everything. The ring, Cynthia, the affair, the hidden accounts. All of it, she cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet tears that broke my heart more than any wailing could have. She mourned not just for her father's betrayal, but for my pain, for the marriage she'd thought was solid and had turned out to be fractured. I'm so sorry, Mom, she whispered. I can't believe Dad would do that. He always seemed so devoted to you. He was devoted in his way. He came back to me. He tried to fix it. That doesn't make it okay. No, I agreed. It doesn't. We sat in silence, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. The ocean was gray-green and turbulent, matching my internal landscape. What will you do now? Ellen asked. Will you stay here? I'd been thinking about that very question. Magnolia Cove had been home for 30 years. But it was Harold's home too. He'd chosen this house, this location, these views. Every corner of it reflected his tastes, his decisions. I think I need to leave, I said slowly. Start fresh somewhere. Somewhere that's mine, not ours. Ellen nodded. Charleston? You could be near us. The kids would love having you close. I considered it. Charleston was lovely, and being near my grandchildren had appeal. But it was also familiar, safe, expected, and I realized I didn't want safe and expected anymore. Maybe not Charleston, I said. Maybe somewhere I've never been. Somewhere I can reinvent myself. Not as Harold's widow. Not as Dr. Lowell the psychologist, but as Sarah. Just Sarah. Ellen squeezed my hand. Then do it, Mom. You're 78, not 98. You could have 20 more good years. Don't spend them haunted by Dad's mistakes. She was right. I'd spent enough time being haunted. That afternoon, I made a decision. I called Marcus Webb. I need you to find one more thing for me, I told him. The Hilton Head condo. The one Harold bought for Cynthia. Find out if it's still available. Dr. Lowell, are you sure? That property is tangled up with the investigation. Untangle it. It was purchased with marital assets, which means it's partially mine. I want it. He was silent for a moment. All right, I'll see what I can do. It took 3 months, but Marcus worked his magic. The condo had been sitting empty since Harold's death. Cynthia had never technically owned it. The LLC had dissolved, and it had fallen into a legal gray area. With proper documentation and a good attorney, I was able to claim it as part of Harold's estate. I drove to Hilton Head on a gray December morning, Ellen beside me for moral support. The condo was in a modern building right on the beach. All glass and clean lines and expansive views. Harold had good taste. I'd give him that. The interior was beautifully furnished. Cynthia's doing, probably. She'd chosen comfortable furniture, coastal colors, artwork that complemented the space. It should have felt like a violation, walking into the love nest my husband had created for his mistress. Instead, it felt like opportunity. I'm going to live here, I told Ellen. She looked around, understanding dawning on her face. You're taking it back. Making it yours, exactly. He bought this place with our money for a lie. I'm going to turn it into a truth, into the life I should have been living all along. Over the next month, I made it happen. I listed the Magnolia Cove house. It sold quickly to a young couple with twin toddlers who loved the space for their growing family. I moved to Hilton Head, bringing only the things that were truly mine. Harold's belongings I gave to charity or threw away. His study furniture, his clothes, his beloved sailing equipment, all of it gone. I kept 3 things. My own wedding ring, which I wore on a chain around my neck now instead of on my finger. The photographs from our early years, before Cynthia, when the marriage had been real and true. And Harold's ring, which I placed in a velvet box in the back of a drawer, a reminder of everything I'd survived. The condo became mine. I repainted in colors I loved. I bought new furniture. I joined a book club and a walking group. I volunteered at a women's shelter, helping others rebuild their lives after betrayal. And slowly, painfully, I began to heal. It was spring again when the sheriff came to visit. I'd been in Hilton Head for 4 months, and I was sitting on my balcony with morning coffee, watching dolphins play in the surf, when my doorbell rang. Sheriff Rodriguez was a serious-looking man in his 50s, with kind eyes that had probably seen too much. He held a manila envelope. Dr. Lowell, I'm Sheriff Rodriguez from Beaufort County. I need to speak with you about Cynthia Reeves. My heart sank. I'd thought I was done with her, done with all of it. What about her? May I come in? I led him to the living room, where he sat on the edge of my couch, still holding the envelope. Mrs. Reeves was arrested 2 weeks ago in Jacksonville, Florida, he said. Insurance fraud. She'd been running a similar scheme there, forging documents, claiming to be the beneficiary of policies. She's facing multiple counts. During the investigation, authorities found evidence related to your husband's case. I see. I wasn't surprised. Cynthia had been desperate, angry. Of course she'd try again. The DA wants to prosecute her for the Georgia charges as well. The forgery related to your husband's ring, the fraudulent life insurance claim, but they need your cooperation. Your testimony. I thought about it. Testifying would mean rehashing everything, making Harold's affair public, sitting in a courtroom while strangers judged my marriage. She signed a confession, I said. My investigator has it. Yes, ma'am. We have that. But the DA feels your testimony would strengthen the case. Mrs. Reeves is claiming emotional distress, that she wasn't in her right mind, that your husband manipulated her. Of course she was, playing the victim. What happens if I don't testify? They'll prosecute based on the Florida charges and the documentary evidence from Georgia. She'll likely get 10 to 15 years. With your testimony, they could add the Georgia charges and increase it to 20 or more. I looked out at the ocean, watching the waves roll in. Cynthia Reeves had stolen my husband's ring, forged my signature, moved next door to torment me. She'd taken money that wasn't hers and tried to profit from Harold's death. But she'd also loved him. However twisted that love had been, however selfish and deluded, it had been real to her. And Harold had encouraged it, promised her things, given her hope before snatching it all away. She was guilty. But so was he. I'll testify, I said finally. But only if the DA agrees to recommend the lower sentence. 10 to 15 years with possibility of parole. I want her punished, Sheriff. But I don't want to destroy her completely. He looked surprised. That's generous, Dr. Lowell, given what she did. I'm 78 years old, Sheriff. I've spent my life studying human behavior, understanding why people do the things they do. Cynthia Reeves is a wounded, desperate woman who made terrible choices. She deserves consequences, but she also deserves the chance to rebuild her life eventually, the way I'm rebuilding mine. He nodded slowly. I'll convey your wishes to the DA. And Dr. Lowell? I have something for you. He opened the envelope and pulled out a smaller evidence bag. Inside was Harold's ring. This was in Mrs. Reeves's possession when she was arrested. The Florida authorities sent it to us. It's yours now. I took the bag, feeling the familiar weight. The gold gleamed through the plastic, and I could just make out the inscription. To Sarah, my forever anchor. There's something else, the sheriff said. When we arrested Mrs. Reeves, she asked me to give you a message. What message? She said, tell Dr. Lowell I'm sorry. Not for loving him, but for hurting her. She didn't deserve that. I sat with those words for a long moment. An apology, finally. Incomplete and inadequate, but real. Thank you, Sheriff. After he left, I took the ring out to my balcony. I held it up to the sunlight, watching it gleam the way it had that morning across the hedge that felt like a lifetime ago. This ring had started everything. The investigation, the revelations, the upheaval of my entire understanding of my marriage. It had been a symbol of betrayal, of theft, of lies. But it was also a symbol of the 48 years Harold and I had shared. Not all of those years had been a lie. Most of them had been real and true and good. The affair had been 5 years out of 48. A betrayal, yes, a deep wound, but not the entirety of our story. I'd spent months focusing on the betrayal, letting it define my marriage retrospectively. But that wasn't fair. Not to Harold's memory, not to myself, and not to the genuine love we'd shared for most of our lives together. I'd never know for certain if Harold would have confessed, if he would have made things right. Death had stolen that possibility, but the evidence suggested he'd been trying. The returned money, the changed will, the plans to come clean. They all pointed to a man who'd made terrible mistakes, but was trying to atone for them. That had to count for something. I opened the evidence bag and pulled out the ring. I turned it over in my palm, reading the inscription one more time. To Sarah, my forever anchor. I had been Harold's anchor, and he'd nearly drowned us both by trying to sail in 2 directions at once, but in the end he'd found his way back. Or tried to. I walked to the edge of the balcony, where the railing overlooked the beach. Below, tourists walked in the sand, Children played in the surf, and the eternal ocean rolled on. I thought about throwing the ring into the water. A dramatic gesture, a final letting go, but that felt dishonest somehow. This ring was part of my history, part of my story. Destroying it wouldn't change what had happened. Instead, I went inside and found a beautiful wooden box I'd bought at a local craft fair. I placed Harold's ring inside, along with my own, the one I'd taken off and put on a chain. I added the photographs from our early years, the good memories I wanted to keep. Then I closed the box and put it on a shelf in my bedroom. Not hidden but not prominently displayed either. Just there, a part of my past that I acknowledged but didn't need to constantly examine. Love could end. Marriages could be imperfect. People could betray you, even people you trusted completely. But dignity, that was eternal. And grace, and the choice to heal rather than let bitterness consume you. I'd lost my husband twice. Once to death. Once to the discovery of his betrayal. I'd lost my sense of safety, my naive trust, my comfortable illusions about my marriage. But I'd gained something too. I'd gained freedom from those illusions. I'd gained the strength to rebuild my life on my own terms. I'd gained the knowledge that I could survive anything, even the worst betrayal imaginable. And I'd gained peace. Not the easy peace of ignorance, but the hard-won peace of someone who'd looked at the worst truths and chosen to move forward anyway. The trial happened 6 months later. I flew back to Georgia and testified for 3 hours, answering questions from both the prosecution and the defense. Cynthia sat at the defendant's table, looking small and gray and defeated. Our eyes met once. I saw no defiance there, no anger, just exhaustion and regret. The jury found her guilty on all counts. The judge, taking my recommendation into consideration, sentenced her to 12 years with the possibility of parole after 8. It was over. Finally, truly over. I flew back to Hilton Head that same day. Ellen met me at the airport. "How are you?" she asked, hugging me tight. "I'm good. Really good." And I was. The testimony had been cathartic, a final purging of all the poison that had built up over the past year. Telling the story out loud, in a courtroom, with Cynthia forced to listen, it had given me a sense of closure I hadn't expected. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Ellen said, as we drove back to the condo. "The way you've handled all of this, the grace you've shown. Dad didn't deserve it, and neither did she, but you gave it anyway." "Grace isn't about what people deserve," I said. "It's about who you choose to be, and I chose not to let their mistakes define me." That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over the ocean. The sky blazed orange and pink and purple, and the water reflected all that fire back up like a mirror. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, lonely, grief-stricken, living in the shadow of a dead man. I thought about the moment I'd seen that ring on Cynthia's hand and felt my world shatter. I'd thought that moment was an ending, the final destruction of everything I'd believed about my life. But it had actually been a beginning. I was no longer Harold Lowell's widow. I was no longer defined by my marriage, by my grief, by my betrayal. I was just Sarah, 79 years old and still learning, still growing, still capable of change and reinvention. I'd survived the worst thing I could imagine, and on the other side of that survival, I'd found something unexpected. I'd found myself. I never expected to fall in love again. At 81, with my history, with my scars, I'd assumed that chapter of my life was closed. I was content with my routines, my book club, my volunteer work, my long walks on the beach with the dog I'd adopted from the shelter. His name was Anchor. The irony wasn't lost on me, but then I met James at a grief support group I'd started facilitating at the community center. He was a widower too, 83, with kind eyes and a gentle laugh and no secrets I had to uncover. We were friends first. Coffee dates that turned into dinner dates that turned into long conversations on the beach while Anchor chased seagulls. He knew my story. I'd been honest from the start, unwilling to build anything on lies or omissions. He told me his story too. His wife had died of cancer after 60 years of marriage. They'd been happy, he said. Not perfect, but happy. Real. I don't want perfect, I told him one evening as we watched the sunset from my balcony. Perfect is an illusion. I want real. I want honest. Then that's what I'll give you, he said. We got married on the beach 18 months after we met. Ellen and my grandchildren came, along with James's 3 children and 7 grandchildren. It was small and simple and perfect in its imperfection. I wore white because at 81 I could wear whatever I wanted. And I wore a new ring, a simple band that James had chosen, with no inscription, no promises of forever. Just a symbol of now, of this moment, of 2 old people choosing to be brave enough to try again. Ellen cried during the ceremony, happy tears this time. I'm so glad you found each other, she whispered, as she hugged me afterward. You deserve this, Mom. After everything, I looked at James, laughing with his grandchildren, and at the ocean beyond, and at the life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. I think I finally understand something, I told Ellen. Harold's affair, Cynthia, all of it. It broke me. But in breaking, I had to rebuild. And in rebuilding, I got to choose who I wanted to be. I got to shed all the roles and expectations and become just me. And who is that? Ellen asked, smiling. I thought about it. Someone who survived. Someone who learned that love can coexist with betrayal, that marriage can be both real and false, that you can be angry and forgiving at the same time. Someone who learned that the end of one story can be the beginning of another. That's beautiful, Mom. It's true. I looked at Harold's ring, which I still kept in the wooden box in my bedroom. I'd shown it to James, told him the whole story. He'd held it, looked at the inscription, and handed it back. That was your past, he'd said. It made you who you are. But it doesn't have to define your future. He was right. The ring would always be part of my story, but it was no longer the whole story. I was no longer just the woman who'd been betrayed. I was the woman who'd survived betrayal and chosen to love again anyway. Was the woman who'd looked at the worst truths about her marriage and still found beauty in the good memories. Was the woman who'd shown grace to her enemy and justice to herself. I was Serafina Lowell, 81 years old, a survivor, a fighter, a woman who'd learned that the truth always finds its way home, but so does hope. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Dr. Serafina Lowell never needed closure, just justice. And in seeking justice, she found something better. She found herself.